The flashlight beam cut through the palmetto scrub at midnight, catching something that didn't belong. Deputy Frank Castellano froze on the trail, his hand moving instinctively to his radio. 30 yards ahead, a figure knelt in the sandy earth beneath a slash pine, working methodically with a folding shovel. The scraping sound carried across the still September air of 1998, rhythmic and purposeful. When Castellano called out, the digger's head snapped up, and in that instant, before recognition set in, the deputy saw something he'd never forgotten from a decade earlier: the hollow stare of someone who'd crossed a line and couldn't find their way back. The figure was Ryan Kellerman. He'd been 23 when he vanished alongside his best friend, Marcus Tovey, from a fishing camp near Lake Istokpoga in the summer of 1988. Now he was 33, weathered and gaunt, his hands blistered and raw. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy deep, real-world investigations. What Castellano didn't know yet was that the shovel in Ryan's hands would unlock a 10-year mystery that had consumed 2 families, 3 detective rotations, and an entire rural county. The vanishing June 14th, 1988. The temperature had peaked at 94 degrees by late afternoon when Ryan Kellerman and Marcus Tovey loaded their gear into Marcus's rusted Ford pickup. They'd grown up 3 houses apart in Sebring, Florida, spending summers wading through cypress swamps and fishing the tannic waters that threaded through Highlands County. Both worked construction, saved money in coffee cans, and talked about buying land somewhere near the Kissimmee River. They were inseparable. The fishing camp they chose sat on the eastern shore of Lake Istokpoga, accessible only by a sand road that wound through palmetto flats and pine barrens. It was a place locals knew: 12 wooden cabins arranged in a horseshoe, a communal dock, and a payphone mounted outside the camp office. The owner, a man named Earl Dutton, kept a handwritten ledger and collected rent in cash. When Ryan and Marcus checked in that Tuesday evening, Earl noted their arrival time as 6:20 p.m. and assigned them cabin 7. He remembered Marcus joking about catching a 10-pound bass, and Ryan carrying a green canvas duffel that looked heavy. They were seen the following morning, Wednesday, launching a 12-foot aluminum skiff just after dawn. A retired schoolteacher named Doris Krantz, staying in cabin 3, watched them motor south along the shoreline, their rods already in the water. She testified later that she'd envied their ease with each other, the way they moved in the boat without needing to speak. She returned to her cabin around 9 a.m. and didn't see them again. By Thursday evening, their truck still sat in the gravel lot, but cabin 7 remained dark. Earl Dutton knocked twice, got no answer, and used his master key. The cabin was undisturbed. Sleeping bags rolled neatly on the bunks, a cooler with melted ice, 2 tackle boxes latched shut. The green duffel sat beneath the window, unopened. When Earl checked the dock, the aluminum skiff was gone. He waited until Friday morning to call the Highlands County Sheriff's Office, figuring young men sometimes lost track of time on the water. The search begins. Detective Sergeant Paul Rieger arrived at the camp on Friday afternoon with 2 deputies and a Polaroid camera. He was 41, methodical, and carried a spiral notebook everywhere. He photographed cabin 7 from multiple angles, documenting the untouched gear, the duffel bag's contents, clothes, a Motorola pager still clipped to a belt, a paperback novel with a receipt marking page 37. He bagged the receipt. It was dated June 13th, the day before they'd arrived, from a convenience store in Sebring. The initial water search began Saturday morning. 6 boats swept Lake Istokpoga in expanding grid patterns, coordinated by VHF radio from a command post Earl Dutton set up in the camp office. Rieger stood at the shoreline with a topographic map spread across the hood of his cruiser, marking each completed sector with a red pencil. By Sunday, they'd covered 60% of the lake and found nothing. A Marine patrol officer named Torres suggested the skiff might have drifted into one of the tributary creeks that fed into the lake. Riga dispatched 2 teams to check. On Monday, a fisherman named Glenn Acosta radioed in. He'd found the aluminum skiff lodged against a cypress knee in a narrow channel 2 miles south of the camp. The oars were inside, crossed neatly. Both life jackets remained under the bench seat, unused. Riga motored out with a deputy and a 35mm camera loaded with black and white film. He photographed the boat from every angle, then pulled it free and towed it back to shore. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no damage to the hull. It looked like someone had simply stepped out and walked away. The land search intensified. 30 volunteers from Sebring joined deputies and 2 tracking dogs on Tuesday morning. They spread out in a line, moving through saw palmetto and wiregrass, checking behind every pine, calling the names until their voices went hoarse. The June heat pressed down like a weight. By Wednesday, the temperature reached 98 degrees, and Riga pulled the volunteers back, limiting the search to professionals. They found boot prints in soft sand near the channel where the skiff had been recovered. But rain the previous night had blurred the edges. A K9 unit tracked a scent for 300 yards before losing it at a limestone outcrop. The families arrived that week. Ryan's mother, Catherine, rented a motel room in Sebring and refused to leave. Marcus's father, a steel fabricator named Dennis, took unpaid leave and joined every search team that would have him. Riga met with them daily, explaining each development, each dead end. Catherine brought a framed photograph of Ryan and Marcus taken the previous Christmas. They were grinning, arms slung around each other's shoulders, snow from a rare cold snap still visible on the ground behind them. Riga clipped the photo to his sun visor and looked at it every time he drove to the camp. By late June, the active search scaled back. Riga kept the case open, following up on reported sightings that never panned out. A cashier in Okeechobee claimed she'd seen 2 young men matching their description buying cigarettes. A motel clerk in Fort Pierce called about a guest who'd checked in without ID. None of it led anywhere. The case became a file on Riga's desk, then a box in the evidence room, then a memory that surfaced whenever someone mentioned Lake Istokpoga. The waiting year's time moves differently for people left behind. Catherine Kellerman converted Ryan's bedroom into a place she could sit and think, leaving his high school trophies on the shelf, his work boots by the door. She answered the phone on the first ring for months, then years, always hoping. Dennis Tovey returned to work, but kept Marcus's locker at the fabrication shop exactly as his son had left it. The lunch bag, the safety goggles, the note taped inside that said, "Back by 5." Detective Riga retired in 1994, handing the Kellerman-Tovey file to a younger investigator named Monica Suarez. She reviewed everything: witness statements, photographs, the logbook from Earl Dutton's camp office showing their check-in time. She even drove out to Lake Istokpoga on a humid afternoon and stood where the skiff had been found, trying to feel her way into what might have happened. The water looked dark and indifferent. She filed a supplemental report recommending the case remain open but suspended, barring new evidence. That evidence arrived on September 19, 1998, at 12:47 a.m. Deputy Castellano had been patrolling County Road 621, a 2-lane that skirted the eastern boundary of what had once been the Lake Istokpoga fishing camp. The camp had closed in 1992 after Earl Dutton died, and the cabins now stood empty, slowly surrendering to palmetto and vines. Castellano's headlights swept across the overgrown entrance road, and he nearly missed the vehicle parked 50 yards in. A faded blue sedan with mud splattered across the license plate. He pulled in, killed the engine, and grabbed his flashlight. The sedan was empty, driver's door ajar. He keyed his radio to dispatch, reporting the plate number, and then he heard it, the scraping sound, steady and mechanical. He followed a trail beaten down through the brush, moving slowly, his hand near his sidearm. When he reached the clearing beneath the slash pine, he saw the figure kneeling, digging, head down in concentration. "Sheriff's office, stop what you're doing and put the shovel down." The figure looked up, and Castellano's breath caught. The face was older, lined and sun-damaged, but the eyes were the same ones he'd seen in the photo Catherine Kellerman had circulated for years. Ryan Kellerman, alive. Digging in the dirt at midnight like a man possessed. Would you have made the same call if you'd been in their place, returning to the site after a decade, knowing what you'd left behind? The return. Ryan didn't run. He set the shovel down carefully and raised his hands, blinking in the flashlight beam like someone waking from a dream. Castellano approached slowly, his training warring with disbelief. He'd been a rookie deputy in 1988, barely involved in the original search, but he knew the case. Everyone in Highlands County knew the case. "Ryan Kellerman?" Castellano's voice was steadier than he felt. "Yes." The word came out rough, barely audible. "You know people have been looking for you for 10 years? Ryan nodded. He looked down at the shallow hole he'd been digging, maybe 18 inches deep, then back at Castellano. "I had to come back." Castellano radioed for backup and kept his distance, watching Ryan's hands, watching his eyes. The man didn't seem dangerous, just exhausted. Within 20 minutes, 2 more cruisers arrived, followed by Detective Suarez, who'd been roused from sleep and made the drive from Sebring in 15 minutes. She stepped out of her sedan wearing jeans and a department windbreaker, her badge clipped to her belt. She approached Ryan slowly, studying him in the flashlight beams. "Mr. Kellerman, I'm Detective Suarez. Can you tell me what you're doing out here?" Ryan's hands were shaking now. "I buried something. I had to dig it up." "What did you bury?" "The truth." Suarez motioned to one of the deputies, who handed her a flashlight. She crouched beside the hole Ryan had been working, shining the beam into the disturbed earth. About 6 inches down, something reflected back, a glint of metal. She looked up at Ryan. "What is that?" "A coffee can." Suarez pulled latex gloves from her pocket and worked carefully, brushing sand away until she could grip the object. It was a Folgers can, the kind used for storing nails or screws, sealed with duct tape that had degraded over the years. She lifted it free and set it on the ground between them. "What's inside?" Ryan closed his eyes. "Film and a letter." The excavation. They transported Ryan to the Highlands County Sheriff's Office, booking him not as a suspect, but as a material witness. Suarez didn't know what she had yet. A missing person returned, evidence buried for a decade, and no clear indication of what crime, if any, had been committed. She placed Ryan in an interview room with water and a bologna sandwich, then took the coffee can to the evidence processing area, where a senior technician named Hal Brewster was waiting. Brewster had worked the original case in 1988, processing the cabin, the skiff, the boot prints. He looked at the coffee can like it was a ghost. Suarez photographed it from multiple angles under fluorescent light, then carefully peeled away the duct tape. Inside, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, were 4 rolls of 35mm film and a folded piece of notebook paper. The letter was written in pencil, the handwriting cramped and urgent. "If you're reading this, I'm either dead or I finally found the courage to come back. What happened at the lake wasn't an accident. Marcus didn't drown. I didn't lose him. I made a choice, and I've lived with it every day since. The film will show you what I couldn't say. Develop it carefully. The 4th roll is the one that matters. I'm sorry." Ryan Suarez read it twice, then handed it to Brewster. "We need these developed. I'll call Jerry Macon. He's got a dark room, still does analog work." Jerry Macon arrived at the sheriff's office by 3 a.m., a retired photographer who documented crime scenes for the county through the 80s. He took the film rolls into the makeshift darkroom they'd set up in a converted storage closet, working under safe light with chemical baths and enlarger paper. Suarez and Brewster waited outside, drinking coffee that had gone bitter hours earlier. At 5:15 a.m., Macon emerged with wet prints hanging from clips, arranged chronologically. The first roll showed Ryan and Marcus at the fishing camp, setting up their gear, laughing on the dock, holding up a small base. The second roll showed them on the water, the aluminum skiff gliding across Lake Istokpoga's glassy surface. The third roll captured them in the channel where the skiff was eventually found, surrounded by cypress knees draped in Spanish moss. The fourth roll changed everything. The first images showed Marcus climbing out of the skiff onto the bank, carrying a fishing rod and a tackle box. Then Marcus kneeling beside something half buried in the sand, a wooden crate, weathered and partially rotted. The next shots showed them prying the crate open, both of them staring down at the contents with expressions that shifted from curiosity to shock. The final photographs captured what was inside: stacks of bundled cash, water-damaged but unmistakable, and beneath them, wrapped in oilcloth, a snub-nosed revolver. Suarez studied the prints in silence. Brewster leaned over her shoulder. They found someone's stash. And it got them killed, Suarez said quietly, or one of them. The interview. At 6 a.m., with the developed photographs spread across her desk, Suarez entered the interview room where Ryan had been waiting. He looked smaller now, hollowed out, his blistered hands folded on the table. She set a cassette recorder between them, stated the date, time, and participants, and gave Ryan his Miranda rights. He waived his right to an attorney. "Tell me what happened, Ryan." "Start from the beginning." He took a long breath, staring at a water stain on the ceiling. "We found it by accident. Marcus hooked something in the channel, and when we pulled up, we saw the corner of the crate sticking out of the bank. We thought it was just trash at first, but then Marcus said we should check just in case. We pulled it free, and when we opened it, you found the money." Ryan nodded. "And the gun." "We sat there for maybe an hour, just looking at it, trying to figure out what to do. Marcus wanted to take it. He said whoever buried it was probably dead or in prison, and nobody would ever know. But I knew it was wrong. I told him we should report it, turn it in to the sheriff." "What did Marcus say?" "He got angry, said I was being naive, that this was our chance to actually do something with our lives, buy that land we'd always talked about. We argued. It got heated." Ryan's voice cracked. "Then he pulled the gun out." Suarez leaned forward. "He pointed it at you?" "No. He just held it, turning it over in his hands, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, 'If you turn this in, you're choosing them over me.' It wasn't a threat exactly. It was worse. It was a test of loyalty." "What did you do?" Ryan looked directly at Suarez for the first time. "I failed the test. We loaded the crate into the skiff and headed back to shore, but we were both silent, both processing what this meant. When we got close to the camp, Marcus said we should hide it overnight, think things through, decide in the morning. So we pulled into a side channel and carried the crate inland, maybe 300 yards. We buried it under that slash pine. The same place you were digging tonight." "Yes. We marked it by tying a strip of red cloth around a branch. Marcus said we'd sleep on it, talk it out over breakfast. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what we'd become if we took that money. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and walked back to the site alone. I stood there with my flashlight, looking at the disturbed ground, and I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't let this happen." Suarez waited, letting the silence build. "So I dug it up again. I took the crate back to the skiff and loaded it in. Then I woke Marcus up and told him we were leaving, that I was taking it to the sheriff in the morning. He lost it. He grabbed my arm, said I was betraying him, that I was throwing away everything we'd worked for. I pulled free and started walking toward the dock. He followed me and we fought, really fought for the first time in our lives. Physically? Just shoving at first. Then he swung at me and I swung back. We ended up on the dock grappling, both of us stupid and angry and terrified. And then Ryan stopped, his face contorting. He slipped. His foot went out from under him, and he went over the edge into the water. It was dark, maybe 4 a.m. I heard the splash and ran to the edge, calling his name. He came up once, sputtering, and I reached for him. Our hands touched, but the crate was still in the skiff, and I think he saw it, saw me choosing principle over him one more time. He pulled his hand back and went under. Did he come up again? No, I jumped in, dove down, searched until the sun came up, but the water was murky and I couldn't find him. By the time it was light enough to see, he was gone. Suarez absorbed this carefully. Why didn't you report it? Because I was terrified. We'd fought over stolen money and a gun. His death was my fault, even if I didn't mean for it to happen. I panicked. I took the crate out to deep water and dumped it. Then I took the film out of my camera. I'd been documenting the trip for fun, and buried it at the site where we'd originally hidden the money. I thought maybe someday I'd come back and retrieve it, use it to prove what really happened, if I ever had the courage. Then I set the skiff adrift and walked out through the Palmetto Flats. I hitchhiked to Fort Myers, changed my name, got work as a framer under the table. I've been living in Lehigh Acres for the last 10 years, alone, trying to figure out how to come back. What made you finally return? Ryan's eyes filled. Marcus's father died 3 months ago. I saw the obituary in a newspaper someone left at a diner. It said he was predeceased by his son, Marcus, who disappeared in 1988. It said he never stopped looking, and I realized I'd stolen more than Marcus's life. I'd stolen his father's chance to bury his son, to know the truth. So I came back to dig up the film, to turn myself in, to finally tell someone what happened. Resolution. The investigation that followed Ryan's confession took 6 weeks. Divers from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission searched the deep water of Lake Istokpoga using sonar and underwater cameras. On October 8, 1998, they located human remains at a depth of 32 feet, tangled in submerged vegetation near a limestone shelf. Dental records confirmed the identity: Marcus Tovey. A separate dive team recovered the crate Ryan had dumped. The cash had disintegrated, but the revolver was still intact. Forensic analysis showed it had been used in an armed robbery in Okeechobee County in 1986, part of an unsolved case involving a fishing supply store. The store's owner had reported $12,000 stolen. The buried stash had apparently been the proceeds, hidden and never retrieved by the robbers, who were later killed in an unrelated car accident. Suarez matched the details of Ryan's account against the physical evidence: the boot prints at the channel, the undisturbed cabin, the carefully crossed oars in the skiff, everything aligned. The medical examiner determined Marcus's cause of death as drowning, with bruising consistent with a struggle, but no evidence of homicide. The state attorney's office reviewed the case and declined to prosecute Ryan for manslaughter, citing the accidental nature of the death and the decade of psychological burden he'd carried. Catherine Kellerman met with Ryan in November 1998 in a conference room at the sheriff's office with Detective Suarez present. She listened to his full account, tears streaming down her face, and when he finished, she reached across the table and took his hands. "You were 23 years old and terrified. I don't forgive you for leaving, but I understand why you did." Dennis Tovey's widow, Eleanor, chose not to meet with Ryan, but she released a statement through the family's attorney, thanking him for finally providing answers. Marcus was buried beside his father in a cemetery outside Sebring, the grave marked with a simple headstone that read, "Beloved son and friend, 1965-1988, finally home." Ryan Kellerman underwent psychological evaluation and was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder and survivor's guilt. He entered treatment and, with the help of a local contractor who knew his story, found work rebuilding damaged homes after Hurricane George. He never returned to Lehigh Acres. Instead, he rented a small apartment in Sebring, 3 miles from where he and Marcus had grown up. On the first anniversary of his return, Ryan visited Marcus's grave and left a single item, the red cloth strip they'd tied around the tree branch a decade earlier. It was faded and torn, but still recognizable. He knelt there for an hour, speaking quietly to his friend, asking forgiveness he wasn't sure he deserved but desperately needed. The Weight of Choices Detective Suarez closed the case officially in December 1998, filing a comprehensive report that detailed every element of the investigation, from the original disappearance through Ryan's return and the recovery of Marcus's remains. She included the developed photographs, Ryan's written confession, the forensic findings, and witness statements that corroborated the timeline. The report concluded with a reflection on the nature of choices made under pressure, the consequences of fear, and the long shadow cast by a single moment of panic. The coffee can, the film, and the photographs were logged into evidence and stored in a climate-controlled facility. The revolver was transferred to Okeechobee County to close their 1986 case. The skiff, which had been stored in the sheriff's impound lot for a decade, was finally released and sold at auction, the proceeds donated to a fund Catherine Kellerman established for missing persons investigations. The fishing camp, where it all began, remains abandoned, swallowed by Florida's relentless vegetation. The cabins have collapsed inward, their roofs caved under the weight of vines and weather. The dock where Marcus slipped and fell rotted away years ago, leaving only pilings that rise from the water like skeletal fingers. But sometimes, on quiet mornings, fishermen report seeing a figure standing at the edge of the water, staring out across Lake Istokpoga, as if searching for something just beneath the surface. Ryan Kellerman continues to live in Sebring. He attends a support group for people who've experienced traumatic loss and volunteers with a local search and rescue organization, helping find those who've gone missing in the backcountry. He never married, never had children, and rarely speaks about the summer of 1988, except to say that some friendships are too deep to survive the weight of moral choices. What would you have done differently, faced with found money, a best friend's demand for loyalty, and a split-second decision that would define the rest of your life? Would you have had the courage to choose principle over friendship, knowing it might cost everything? Or would you have buried the truth so deep that even you couldn't find it again? If you appreciate real investigations like this one, subscribe and stay curious. The truth is always worth uncovering, even when it takes a decade and a midnight excavation to bring it into the light.